Two white men chase down a black jogger, murder him, and nobody does anything about it for months. Stick around and find out more about it. I'm sure many of you are aware of the Ahmaud Arbery case, and I've been asked if I can give my take on the situation. Now, of course, the case is still ongoing, and there's evidence that is not available to the public, so I don't actually feel comfortable giving an opinion on the overall situation. What I can do is try to explain why prosecutors initially declined to prosecute the two men until months later. Before we get into that, I want to explain why I would know anything about this. I was never a prosecutor, but when I was in the Army, I did spend 4 years in criminal investigations, and one of the things that I regularly did was take my cases to prosecutors. JAG if the suspect was military, or SAUSA if the suspect was a civilian, and I would brief them on the entire thing. We would then discuss whether or not there was adequate evidence that the subject had met all the elements of the crime or crimes they had been charged with, and whether or not it was worth the time and effort to prosecute based on the circumstances. So, the situation, to put it simply, is this. Travis and Gregory McMichael see Ahmaud Arbery jogging, claim that he matches the description of a burglar, and hop in a truck to detain him as part of a citizen's arrest. During the attempt to detain him, the son fires a shotgun multiple times at Arbery and kills him. To make it worse, the father and son are white, Arbery is black, and this takes place in Georgia, a state with a bit of a history of racism. Lovely peaches, though. Now, if this case came across my desk, there are a few things that I would want to immediately look into. 1. Why did the two think Arbery was a burglar? 2. Why did they bring guns? 3. Did they conduct a citizen's arrest properly in accordance with Georgia state law? And 4. Why was Arbery shot? First, why did they think that he was the burglar? Well, there had been multiple claims of cars broken into in the neighborhood on social media, and one police report of a stolen firearm from Travis McMichael's car. Additionally, Travis called 911 on February 11th to report what he believed was a suspicious black male entering a house that was under construction. Travis had never seen him there before and decided to report it to the police. The following is from the Wikipedia article on the shooting of Ahmaud, and I know, using Wikipedia as a source, ew. But I did listen to the 911 call, and it checks out. Quote, on February 11, 2020, Travis called 911 to report a slender, 6-foot-tall black man with short hair wearing red shorts and a white shirt who was trespassing on the site of a house under construction. Travis was breathing heavily on the call and said, "I've never seen this guy before in the neighborhood." The dispatcher asked whether Travis was okay, and he said, "Yeah, it just startled me. When I turned around and saw him and backed up, he reached into his pocket and ran into the house. So I don't know if he was armed or not, but he looked like he was acting like he was. We've been having a lot of burglaries and break-ins around here lately," Travis said on the call. He told the dispatcher that he was out in his truck and that as many as 4 neighbors were out looking for the man. End quote. This next bit also comes from the Wikipedia article. I reviewed the sources, and video being referenced, and it once again checks out. Quote, on February 23, 2020, in the minutes before the shooting, a security camera installed on a residence across the street from a house under construction in the neighborhood recorded a man identified by his family as Arbery coming down the road and walking into the house. A second security camera installed within the house recorded a man identified as Arbery by his family looking at the interior of the house. Approximately 5 minutes later, he left and resumed going down the street. After the man left the house, the first camera on the residence across the street showed a white pickup heading the man's direction, followed a few minutes later by 2 police cars. End quote. This answers our first 2 questions. The McMichaels believe Arbery was the suspect because someone matching his description had been seen entering the house before, and he was confirmed to have entered the house the day that he was shot. The McMichaels claim they brought guns because they believe the suspect may have been armed, based on the fact that Travis had believed the trespasser from February 11th, who appears to have matched Arbery's description, may have been armed. I would, as an investigator, consider this reasonable, assuming I had no evidence to contradict their side of the story. The third question is more difficult to answer. Did they properly conduct a citizen's arrest? Georgia Statute 17-4-60 states, quote, a private person may arrest an offender if the offense is committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. If the offense is a felony and the offender is escaping or attempting to escape, a private person may arrest him upon reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion, end quote. Is it reasonable to believe an offense had been committed? Burglary is a felony. It wouldn't be difficult to articulate a reason why they suspected he was committing burglary, based on the reports of theft in the area and the fact that they witnessed Arbery entering property that wasn't his and running away from it. We now know that a burglary had not been committed, and Arbery was out for a jog, but it wouldn't be difficult to convince me that the grounds of suspicion that a burglary had taken place were both reasonable and probable. At the time, the McMichaels did not know that Arbery was out for a jog, and they didn't know that nothing had been stolen. I don't doubt, though, that this will be hotly debated in court, and I imagine both sides will have excellent arguments. Gregory McMichaels is a former police officer, so one would hope that he would be familiar with all of the statutes involved. The local police department sure seemed to think so, since prior to the shooting of Arbery, they recommended that the owner of the house Arbery entered should reach out to Greg if the issue with people trespassing persisted. According to the police report, Gregory McMichaels did instruct Arbery to stop so that the McMichaels could talk to him, but I don't believe that that would have let Arbery know that a citizen's arrest was being conducted, and I'm sure the failure to clearly inform Arbery that he was being lawfully detained is going to be brought up in court. That brings us to our next question. Why did they shoot Arbery? Well, after pursuing him for 4 minutes, the McMichaels pulled in front of Arbery to cut him off, something they had already tried before during the pursuit, but Arbery had turned around and run in a different direction the first time they had tried to do so. That's understandable. I'd turn around too if someone was following me in a truck with a gun and trying to cut me off while I was out for a jog. The problem is that the McMichaels believed Arbery was fleeing from the scene of a crime, and likely thought Arbery was changing directions to try to avoid being caught. When Travis exited the vehicle, he was holding a shotgun, although it is unclear where it was pointed. Before you get angry at me for what I'm about to say, please let me finish. Arbery can be seen attacking Travis, who fires the shotgun multiple times. At that point, Travis has a decent chance at claiming self-defense, but there are still a lot of questions that must be answered. For example, did Travis point the shotgun at Arbery before being attacked? If that's the case, that would probably be an additional charge. Additionally, since Travis and Gregory didn't appear to actually say that Arbery was being detained as part of a citizen's arrest, they may not be able to claim self-defense, since they instigated a reasonable, albeit violent, reaction by Arbery, who appears to have been trying to defend his own life. Unless, of course, they didn't have time to properly explain the situation to Arbery after confronting him on foot. But couldn't Travis have made his presence more obvious, instead of surprising Arbery when he ran past the truck, which may have reduced the chances of Arbery instinctively, presumably, trying to grab the shotgun to defend himself? Couldn't they have parked a little further down the road? That's something I definitely would have asked during interviews with Travis and Gregory, and maybe investigators did. Maybe the McMichaels didn't park further down the road because they thought Arbery would just change directions again. Why not ask whether Arbery was technically detained? If not, could Williams and the McMichaels be charged with conspiracy to commit an unlawful detention? A lot of this information is still unavailable, and there are defenses and counters to those defenses that could easily be made based on what is available to the public. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. What is clear, though, is that there are a lot of questions that will need to be answered for a successful prosecution of the McMichaels. In fact, George Barnhill, a district attorney who was tasked with reviewing the case, stated in a letter to Captain Tom Jump of the Glynn County Police Department, quote, "It appears Travis McMichael, Greg McMichael, and Brian Williams were following, in hot pursuit, a burglary suspect with solid first-hand probable cause in their neighborhood, and asking/telling him to stop. It appears their intent was to stop and hold this criminal suspect until law enforcement arrived. Under Georgia law, this is perfectly legal. It clearly appears Travis McMichael and Greg McMichael had firearms being carried in an open fashion. The investigation shows neither of them to be convicted felons or under felony supervision. They were in a motor vehicle owned by Travis McMichael. Under Georgia law, this is legal open carry. Given the fact Arbery initiated the fight, at the point Arbery grabbed the shotgun, under Georgia law, McMichael was allowed to use deadly force to protect himself. For the above and foregoing reasons, it is our conclusion there is insufficient probable cause to issue arrest warrants at this time." End quote. Now, I only found this letter after I put together my own assessment, and it seems to match my thoughts on this incident based on the initial information pretty closely, and I do strongly emphasize the initial information. I do think it's very important to address the fact that Barnhill was open to prosecuting this at a later date, but wanted more evidence first before presenting it to a district attorney review to determine whether or not it should be taken to a grand jury. Barnhill's advice is based on the autopsy, video, photographs, witness statements taken immediately on the scene, and statements made by the McMichaels. This is a guy who had been a criminal prosecutor for 36 years. That's a long time. I'd like to believe that he knew what he was talking about. I have 3 more things I'd like to address. 1, this video that you're watching right now only takes into account the initial facts. There is a lot more information out there regarding the situation now. This video is not intended to discuss the possibility that the incident may have been racially motivated, although you may come to that conclusion after conducting more research on your own. You may also find it interesting that Barnhill had worked with Greg McMichaels before, which may have affected the decision to advise against immediately issuing arrest warrants. Again, I encourage you to explore that on your own. 2. Is shooting someone excessive if they attack with just a fist? Well, if they punch you and run away, then yes, that is excessive. However, if they continue to attack, which is what Arbery appears to have done, what happens when they win? Now they have your gun, and they've already beaten you senseless, so why not shoot you too? That's a defense that has held up in court, although results may vary based on the totality of the circumstances and local case law. 3. Should you go and conduct a citizen's arrest yourself? Probably not. The law on citizen's arrest does vary from state to state, and if you get any of it wrong, you could face a lot of time in prison. I would never advise anyone to conduct a citizen's arrest unless they were willing to be imprisoned for it. Even I, someone who was law enforcement, would be incredibly hesitant to do it. I think what happened with this situation is terrible. However, is it criminal? That remains to be seen. I know this video isn't going to win me any popularity points, but I thought it was important to explain a few of these things. The original police report as well as the letter written by George Barnhill are in the video description. I encourage you to review them for context. If you believe citizens should not have the lawful authority to detain people, I can understand that, but you'll get nowhere complaining about it to me. Participate in your local elections, petition the government to change existing laws, and until the next time, be good, stay safe.